The music was loud, the drinks were flowing, and everyone at the birthday party in Lusaka West was having a good time. Liana was smiling, dancing freely with a man who had just arrived, someone no one seemed to recognize. Her husband, Kwesi, watched from a distance, fuming with jealousy. He stormed through the crowd, grabbed Liana by the arm, and slapped her hard across the face. The music stopped. Everyone turned. People gasped. Kwesi raised his voice, shouting about respect, claiming no wife of his should be dancing with another man. His friends laughed, thinking he had put her in her place. But then the man stepped forward, eyes wide, shocked and confused. "Liana," he said gently. She turned to him, tears in her eyes, holding her sore cheek. "Musa," she whispered. The man nodded slowly. "It's me. Your cousin. I just returned from military duty. I came to surprise you." A deep silence fell over the room. Kwesi's face drained of color. The same people who were laughing now looked away in shame. No one said a word. And Liana, holding back her tears, walked out of the party, leaving behind a room full of people who finally saw who truly needed correcting. The hall was full of light, music and laughter. It was Tobias's big night, a promotion party thrown by his company, and he wanted to impress everyone. His girlfriend, Afia, walked in quietly, wearing a long, colorful dress. It wasn't designer, but it was neat, bright, and carefully made. As she reached Tobias and his friends, one of the men whispered something, and they all burst into laughter. Tobias turned to Afia, looked her up and down, and suddenly pulled on her dress. With one harsh tug, he ripped the fabric across the back. People gasped. She froze in shock. He laughed and said loudly, "Who wears this cheap nonsense to a night like this? What were you thinking?" Everyone turned to stare. Afia's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say a word. She covered herself and walked away quickly, humiliated. But what no one knew, not even Tobias, was that Afia had spent 2 weeks stitching that dress by hand. She had no money to buy a new outfit, so she went to the tailor's trash pile, picked up leftover scraps, and taught herself to sew on YouTube. She worked every night after cleaning homes just to make something special for his night. She wanted to look beautiful for him. And the reason she had no money? Because she had used her savings to buy him the expensive cufflinks he was wearing that night, the same ones he proudly showed to his friends. When one of Tobias's colleagues found out the truth, he told the others. One by one the laughter died. Some of the men sat in silence, their heads lowered. One even stood up and left. Tobias tried to laugh it off, but the shame on his face said it all. And Afia? She never came back to that party. And she never answered Tobias's calls again. Sometimes the loudest slap is the one that comes from truth, not a hand. And that night it echoed louder than any music in the hall. Dumo had been acting strange all day. His mood was off and his words were sharp. When he saw Fatou smiling at her phone that evening, he exploded. "Who are you texting? Another man?" he shouted, grabbing the phone from her hands. Before she could speak, he smashed it against the wall. The screen cracked, pieces flew everywhere. Fatou stared at the broken phone in shock, her eyes wide with pain, not just from the phone but from what was inside. Dumo's friends laughed, cheering him on for putting her in her place. But Fatou didn't fight back. She just turned away quietly, holding back tears. What Dumo didn't know was that Fatou wasn't texting anyone. She had just received a message from the hospital, one she'd been waiting for, praying for. For weeks, she had been going through tests in secret, hoping to be a match for Dumo's sick younger brother, Chima. His condition was getting worse by the day, and the family had lost hope. But Fatou hadn't. She signed up to be tested as a kidney donor, never telling anyone because she didn't want praise. She just wanted to help. And that message on her phone? It was the hospital confirming that she was a perfect match. They had found the donor. They had found her. But now the message was gone. And Dumo had no idea. The next morning, when Fatou didn't come around, Dumo's mother called, worried. That's when one of Fatou's friends told them everything. The hospital, the tests, the message, the broken phone. Dumo froze. His anger melted into horror. The girl he had accused, insulted, and humiliated had been trying to save his brother's life. He tried calling her, begging for forgiveness. But Fatou didn't pick up. Her silence spoke louder than his words. That night, Dumo sat beside his brother's hospital bed, broken, ashamed. He had destroyed more than just a phone. He had shattered the trust of the only person who was quietly fighting to save the one he loved most. The school hall was packed. It was the night of the annual talent show, and everyone was buzzing with excitement. When it was Jamila's turn, she stepped onto the stage, her hands shaking slightly. She wasn't dressed like the others. No fancy clothes, no makeup, just her and a mic. She closed her eyes and began to sing. Her voice was soft at first, trembling, but then it grew stronger, filling the hall with emotion. Before she could finish the first verse, laughter broke out, loud and mocking. Bara, the most popular boy in school, and the show's MC, grabbed the mic from the DJ booth. "Please, are we in a funeral?" he joked. "Someone tell this girl we want to be entertained, not put to sleep." The crowd laughed. Jamila stood frozen. Her eyes watered, but she didn't cry. She just whispered thank you and walked off stage. That night everyone talked about the joke, not the song. But what they didn't know was that Jamila had been singing to survive. Music was her only escape from the pain at home, her only way to breathe. And she almost gave it up, until one teacher who had watched the whole thing pulled her aside and said, "Don't let their noise drown your gift." A few weeks later, Jamila auditioned quietly for a national music competition. No crowd, no laughter, just her voice and a mic. And this time people listened. The judges were stunned. Within days, her audition video went viral. A recording label called. She was offered a contract. Studio time. Real stages. Real fans. The next time she sang, it was in a packed stadium. Thousands of people swaying to her voice, including in the back row a silent Bara. No mic in his hand. No jokes. Just the look of someone who had mocked a miracle and now had to watch it shine. Jamila didn't sing to prove anything. She sang because it was who she was. And the world, the same one that once laughed, now paid just to hear her voice. The sun was out, music was playing, and the smell of grilled meat filled the air. It was supposed to be a fun neighborhood barbecue. Everyone was relaxed, laughing, eating and enjoying the day. Zara was there too, quiet, kind, always smiling but never saying much. She walked over with a plate of food, ready to sit next to her friends. But just as she went to sit, Zubair, trying to be the funny guy, pulled her chair away at the last second. Zara fell hard. The plate flew from her hands, food scattered, and her back hit the ground with a loud thud. For a moment there was silence. Then laughter. Zubair clapped his hands, joking, "It's just a game, don't take it seriously." Others laughed too, not realizing the damage that had just been done. But then Zara didn't get up. She sat there trembling, her eyes filled with tears. Someone rushed over to help her up, and as her shirt shifted, people gasped. Faded bruises covered her back, deep dark marks that had nothing to do with the fall. Someone whispered, "That didn't come from today." And suddenly everything changed. The laughter stopped. Zubair's smile faded. Zara tried to cover herself, ashamed and scared. But it was too late. The truth was out. She hadn't told anyone what she was going through at home. The bruises, the silent pain, the tears she cried alone at night. She had come to the barbecue just to feel normal, to feel safe for a few hours. And instead she was humiliated and hurt again. One of the older women pulled her into a hug, holding her like a mother would. People looked at Zubair with disgust now, not laughter. He muttered an apology, but no one was listening. The damage was done. That day Zara didn't just fall from a chair. She fell from trust, from safety. But in that same moment she was finally seen. And for the first time people stopped laughing and started caring. The wedding was full of energy. Music was loud, people were laughing, dancing, celebrating love. Tandy, always full of life, stepped onto the dance floor, moving with joy and confidence. She wasn't wearing designer clothes or expensive makeup, but her smile lit up the room. She danced with heart, spinning, clapping, laughing. Not to show off but just to be happy. But not everyone saw it that way. Just as she twirled near her boyfriend, Saifo, he grabbed her arm and pushed her aside. "Stop it, Tandy," he snapped. "You're embarrassing me in front of everyone." His voice was loud enough for half the room to hear. The music kept playing, but a few people stopped dancing. Some looked away awkwardly. Others chuckled under their breath. Tandy froze, her smile gone. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just picked up her bag and quietly walked out of the hall, alone. What no one knew was that dancing had always been Tandy's dream. Since childhood it was her escape, her passion. She danced through hard times, through grief, through hunger. She didn't dance for applause. She danced because it gave her life. That night, she went home broken but not defeated. 1 month later, posters started popping up online. Tandy Dance Academy. Grand opening. People were surprised. Was this the same Tandy who got pushed off the floor? Yes. But now she wasn't asking for space. She was creating her own. The academy opened in a small rented hall. First just a few students. But then the video started going viral. Her unique style, her story, her strength. Soon she was invited to events, interviews, even got sponsors. The same people who once laughed were now sharing her posts, clapping in the crowd. At another wedding just a few months later, Tandy was the guest performer. She stepped onto the floor with her team, strong and graceful. And in the back, Saifo stood watching, silent, forgotten, and invisible in a crowd that now only had eyes. It was lunchtime at the construction site where Musa worked with his group of friends. They all sat under a tree laughing and eating, while his girlfriend, Amina, walked in with a warm container of food she had made specially for him. She looked tired, her feet dusty, walking barefoot. But she was smiling, proud to surprise him. She handed Musa the food with both hands. "I made your favorite," she said softly. But instead of thanking her, Musa opened the container, took one look and wrinkled his nose. "What is this?" he scoffed, holding it up for everyone to see. His friends started laughing. Trying to act tough, Musa made a show of it. "This is bush food. You want me to eat this in front of people?" he shouted, then threw the container into the dirt. Amina stood there in shock. His friends laughed harder. But one of them, older, quieter, looked down and noticed Amina's bare feet. "Where are your shoes?" he asked gently. She didn't answer. The man stood, walked over to where the food had fallen, and picked up the spilled pieces. "Do you even know what it cost her to cook this?" he asked Musa quietly. "She sold her only pair of shoes at the market yesterday. I saw her. She said she wanted to buy chicken and spices, to make something nice for someone she loved." The laughter stopped. Musa froze, staring at Amina, who was now wiping her tears with the edge of her scarf. She hadn't eaten all day. She had spent the little she had, just to make him proud. She had walked barefoot in the hot sun just to bring him lunch. And he had thrown it away. The silence that followed was louder than any insult. Amina didn't say a word. She just turned and walked away slowly, her head high, her heart heavy. That day Musa lost more than her food. He lost her respect and maybe her love. And the ones who had laughed, they looked down in shame, suddenly realizing that the true feast wasn't in the food, it was in the heart that made it. Zina came home tired every evening, her hands rough from scrubbing floors and doing laundry in other people's homes. She didn't complain. She always came in with a smile and a small bag of groceries. Her husband, Leo, never appreciated it. "You embarrass me," he once said, shaking his head. "A wife of mine cleaning toilets like a maid? What will people say?" He'd say it in front of his friends, laughing, calling her job low class. But Zina just kept working. She knew what her job meant. It wasn't about pride, it was about survival. Leo had a good office job then. Nice suits, lunch with coworkers, confidence in his step. He believed that Zina's small income didn't matter. But then things changed. The company downsized. Leo was laid off with no warning. Weeks passed and no new job came. The bills started to pile up. The rent was due. The lights got cut. Their fridge was nearly empty. Zina didn't say, "I told you so." She just quietly worked extra hours. She took on one more house. She woke up earlier, came home later. She made sure there was food on the table. She paid the bills. She even kept some money aside for Leo's job search. One night, Leo sat at the table eating rice and beans. The same man who once laughed at Zina's work now sat in silence, watching her mop the floor in their tiny living room. His throat tightened. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She looked up, tired but calm. "It's okay," she said softly. "We're still standing. That's what matters." The truth hit him harder than any job loss. The woman he mocked was the one carrying him now. Zina's job didn't just keep the lights on. It revealed the strength of a woman who never asked for praise, only respect. And Leo finally understood that real dignity isn't in what you do. It's in why you do it and who you do it for. Kwame sat with his friends outside a local bar, laughing loudly, beer in hand. They were talking about women, and when his name came up he smirked. "Amma? That girl begged me to marry her," he said with a laugh. She was obsessed. I was even thinking of saying no, but I felt sorry for her. His friends howled with laughter, clapping him on the back. "You're the man," one of them said. But what they didn't know, what Kwame never told them, was the real story. 2 years ago, Amma had been offered a full scholarship to study in Canada. It was her dream, everything she had worked for. She was ready to go. Bags packed, visa approved. Then Kwame's mother fell seriously ill. He was overwhelmed, didn't know what to do. Amma stayed. She postponed her plans, then canceled them completely. She moved into the house, cooking, cleaning, bathing the sick woman like she was her own mother. No cameras, no applause, just quiet sacrifice. When people asked why she never left the country like others, she would just smile and say, "I had something more important to do." She never asked Kwame to marry her. In fact, he was the one who knelt down, crying, begging her to stay after his mother passed. And she said yes, not because she had to, but because she loved him. So when her friend happened to overhear Kwame twisting the story that day, she couldn't keep quiet. The next morning she posted the truth online: the scholarship, the care, the sacrifice. The story spread fast. People were angry, heartbroken. Amma's name trended for days, but not in shame, in honor. Messages poured in. "You are the kind of woman this world doesn't deserve," one read. And Kwame? He tried to apologize, tried to explain. But Amma didn't respond. She didn't need to, because sometimes silence is stronger than shouting. And love, real love, doesn't need to prove anything. It just walks away when it's no longer respected. It was one of those high-class parties in the city: champagne glasses, expensive dresses, fake smiles. Daniel was invited by his boss, and he saw it as a big opportunity. He got his haircut, wore his best suit, and told his girlfriend Linda that it was just a work thing. But the truth was he didn't want her there. "You wouldn't fit in," he had said the night before. "You're too local. It's not your kind of crowd." Linda had stayed quiet. She didn't argue. She just nodded, smiled faintly, and wished him a good time. But what Daniel didn't know was that Linda had been planning a surprise. With the little savings she had from her tailoring job, she bought a second-hand gown and styled her own hair. She didn't need a makeup artist. Her confidence was enough. When she walked into that party, heads turned. Even the women in designer dresses paused. She looked elegant, radiant, like she belonged, because she did. Daniel saw her from across the room and froze. His friends noticed too. "Isn't that your girlfriend?" one asked. But no one was laughing. In fact, they slowly stopped smiling and looked at Daniel with confusion, and then disappointment. Linda didn't come in to cause a scene. She walked with grace, greeted the host politely, and stood in a quiet corner sipping juice. People kept glancing at her. Not because she didn't belong, but because she outshone the rest. Daniel walked over, flustered. "Linda, what are you doing here?" he whispered. She looked at him calmly and said, "Just proving that class isn't about money. It's about how you carry yourself." Then she turned and walked out, leaving Daniel surrounded by silence, the kind that feels heavier than any noise. That night, people didn't talk about the food or the music. They talked about the girl who was too local, and how she stole the spotlight with nothing but dignity. And Daniel? He learned the hard way: when you hide someone out of shame, you often end up hiding yourself in it. It was Kwesi's birthday, and the living room was filled with balloons, drinks, and loud music. His friends were gathered, joking and dancing, waiting to see what gifts he'd get. Among them was Amma, his girlfriend, quiet, loving, and always thinking of small, meaningful things. She didn't have much money, but she had spent 2 weeks working on a handmade photo frame. She printed their favorite pictures, wrote tiny notes on each one, and decorated the edges with shells and beads, just the way he liked. When it was her turn to give him the gift, she handed it over with a shy smile, eyes full of hope. "I made this for you," she said softly. Kwesi took one look at the frame, smirked and laughed. "What is this? Arts and crafts?" he joked loudly, holding it up for his friends to see. They laughed along, not really knowing what they were laughing at. Then, without thinking twice, Kwesi tossed the frame onto the floor near the trash bin. "Get me a real gift next time," he said. Amma's smile faded. She stood there, silent, the room spinning around her. But then, something unexpected happened. One of Kwesi's older friends, Joseph, quietly picked up the frame. His hands trembled as he studied the pictures, reading the little notes Amma had written. His eyes filled with tears. "My wife used to make things like this," he said, his voice low. "Before she passed. I'd give anything to get one more gift like this from her." The room went quiet. Kwesi looked down, ashamed, but Amma had already picked up her bag and left. Joseph later wrapped the frame in his coat and took it home. Not because it was his, but because he understood its worth. That night, Kwesi learned something cruel and real. Not every gift comes with a price tag. Some come wrapped in love, time, and memories, and once thrown away they don't come back. And the girl who gave it, she walked away, knowing she deserved someone who wouldn't laugh at her love, but hold it like treasure. The restaurant was fancy, white tablecloths, soft music, polished floors. It was supposed to be a special dinner. Zara had used the little money she had to buy a simple dress, do her hair, and make it to the evening on time. The only thing she couldn't afford to replace were her old, cracked shoes. She had polished them, hoping no one would notice. But Asher, her boyfriend, noticed. As they sat down with his friends, he looked down and scoffed loudly. "Babe, are those the same shoes you've been wearing since college?" he said, laughing. Everyone at the table turned to look. Some smiled awkwardly, others just stared. "Next time, at least borrow something decent," he added, trying to be funny. Zara's cheeks burned. She forced a smile, nodded politely, and stood up. "Excuse me," she said, holding back tears. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She just walked out, in the same worn-out shoes he had mocked. But she didn't go home. She had another place to be. A second job interview that she had scheduled just an hour later. She had been running around all day, trying to make it to both events. She wiped her tears in the taxi, straightened her dress, and walked into the building. The interviewer barely looked at her shoes. He listened to her story, her experience, her heart. And 20 minutes later he smiled and said, "You're hired." Zara couldn't believe it. She stepped out of that office beaming, the same shoes now soaked with victory. The next day she received her offer letter. Triple the pay of her last job, full benefits, everything she had prayed for. Meanwhile, Asher texted her to come back and talk, but she didn't reply. She had walked away once, and with those very shoes she had walked straight into her future. Sometimes what others mock is the very thing carrying you to your purpose. And Zara's old shoes? They weren't just worn, they were brave. The classroom was quiet as Marembe stood at the front, holding a folded piece of paper in her hands. It was literature day, and students were invited to read their own poems. She had written one for someone special, her boyfriend David. The poem was full of soft words, raw feelings, memories they shared, and dreams she had for them. Her voice trembled a little, but she read each line slowly, her heart in every word. When she finished, there was a short silence. Then from the back of the room, David stood up, clapping sarcastically. "Wow," he said loudly. "That was dramatic. Did you write that in your little diary?" Everyone laughed. He walked up to her, took the paper from her hands and tore it in half right there. Laughter filled the room. Marembe's hands shook. She didn't cry, not in front of them. She just picked up the pieces and walked back to her seat, her face pale, her heart broken. What no one knew was that her literature teacher had heard the poem too. Quietly, she asked Marembe for a copy, saying it deserved to be seen. Marembe almost didn't give it, but something in her heart said yes. A few days later, the poem appeared in a local newspaper. The title was simple, "To the One I Loved." People read it and felt every word. It spread online. Bloggers posted it. Radio stations read it aloud. People cried. They said it reminded them of young love, of heartbreak, of holding on and letting go. And Marembe? She was invited to speak on a TV show. A publisher called. She was asked to write more. David saw it all, her name on headlines, her voice on air. The same girl he mocked was now inspiring thousands. He tried to message her, to act like he had supported her all along. But she didn't reply. Because her words, once torn, had now taken flight. And the world didn't just hear her, it felt her. Marembe didn't need his approval. She had found her power in every word he tried to destroy. The family gathering was going well. Music playing, people laughing, children running around. But then, during a casual conversation, something shifted. Jacob, half drunk and showing off in front of his cousins, suddenly pointed at his wife, Halima, and said loudly, "Ask her why we don't have kids yet. I married a barren woman." The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel. Halima stood frozen, her smile fading. Her hands gripped her glass tightly, but she said nothing. Jacob kept talking like it was just a joke. 4 years and nothing. Maybe I should find someone who can actually give me children. Halima didn't cry. She simply excused herself and walked out, holding her pain deep inside. What no one at that table knew was that Halima had been working double shifts, saving every little coin she could. Not for clothes, not for herself, but for IVF treatments. Quietly, patiently, she had been preparing for a miracle. And what else they didn't know? The hospital had already run tests. 2 weeks later, everything came out. A close family member, tired of Jacob's mockery, revealed the truth. It wasn't Halima who had the issue. It was Jacob. The doctor had already confirmed it. The results were clear. But Jacob, too ashamed to face the truth, had told no one. When the truth spread, the laughter turned into silence. The same people who had laughed now couldn't meet Halima's eyes. Some apologized. Others just looked down in shame. Halima didn't gloat. She didn't seek revenge. She just packed her things and left, with her dignity, her peace, and her quiet strength. And Jacob? He was left alone in a house full of bitterness, facing the echo of his own cruelty. Because some secrets are heavy, but not as heavy as the lies shouted to cover them. And in the end, it wasn't Halima's womb that was empty. It was Jacob. The conference room was full of tension. Everyone sat around the long glass table, waiting for the big investor to arrive. It was an important meeting, one that could change the company's future. Among the team was Nandi, quiet and hardworking, dressed simply, her hair in a neat bun. She spoke softly and with a noticeable rural accent, but her ideas were always smart and clear. Then, as she gave a short update, her colleague Becky leaned over to another and whispered loudly, "She sounds like she just came from the village." A few people chuckled. Nandi heard it. Everyone did. Becky laughed again and added, "We need someone polished for this deal. Not someone who says fish instead of fish." Nandi's face flushed with embarrassment, but she didn't respond. She finished her part calmly and sat down. A few minutes later, the investor walked in. A tall man in a suit, powerful presence, respected across the industry. He introduced himself with a smile, and to everyone's surprise, he spoke Nandi's language fluently. The same language Becky had just mocked. The room fell quiet. Then came the moment that changed everything. The investor looked around and said, "Before we begin, I'd like to know who prepared the market analysis in your report." It was sharp, clear, and written in a voice that understands the people. Nandi hesitated, then raised her hand. He smiled. "I knew it. Only someone from home would understand that deeply." He stood up and walked over to her. "Your voice reminds me of my mother," he said. "Strong, real. Never be ashamed of it." Then he turned to the managers. "I've decided not to move forward with this deal. But if Nandi ever starts her own business, tell her I'd love to invest in that." Gasps filled the room. Becky looked down, stunned, speechless. Nandi sat quietly, her eyes shining, not with tears of shame but with pride. Because sometimes the very thing people mock is what makes you unforgettable. And her accent? Didn't cost.